My name is Henry Lawson. I am 73 years old. On my son's 35th birthday, I plan to give him the Elgin pocket watch my father once passed down to me, a family heirloom that had survived through generations of the Lawsons. It was more than a tool for keeping time. It was a symbol of honor, integrity, and pride among the men of our family. That night, I discovered a plan to take everything from me. The party was held at Lawson House on King Street, the home I built with my own hands. As a man who spent nearly half a century installing and repairing air conditioning and ventilation systems across the city of Charleston, that work had fed my family and raised these walls. Every plank, every duct bore the imprint of my labor. The playful music mixed with the scent of expensive perfume, drowning out the familiar fragrance of cherry wood that my late wife Margaret used to love. It was no longer the smell of home, it was the scent of a performance. The living room, once filled with family laughter, had turned into a stage for my daughter-in-law Vanessa's social ambitions. Each burst of laughter sounded like another nail being driven into the coffin of what once was family memory. I looked around and felt like an antique forgotten in a modern museum, silent among the glittering crowd. They weren't my son's friends. They were witnesses to a replacement. On the walls, the fake paintings Vanessa had chosen reflected the light of white wine glasses. This house once carried Margaret's warmth. Now it echoed only the cold rhythm of Vanessa's high heels tapping against the wooden floor I had laid. I straightened the crooked tablecloth. Margaret hated carelessness and took a deep breath, setting down my cup of cold tea on its coaster. She always said, "Use a coaster, Henry. Everything belongs in its right place." It was time. I stepped to the center of the room and stopped in front of my son, Daniel Lawson. He was smiling, his arm around Vanessa's waist. Under the golden light, I could still recognize those eyes once clear as glass, now filled with ambition and chill. "Happy birthday, son." My voice was low, lost amid the sound of clinking glasses. Daniel turned, startled for a moment, then offered a polite smile, the kind of smile learned by people who live two lives. "Thanks, Dad. I'm glad you came." I nodded. "I have something for you." From my coat pocket, I took out a small wooden box, its paint chipped with age. The latch clicked softly as I opened it. Inside lay the old Elgin watch, its gold plating long faded, the leather strap worn by time, yet its hands still turning slow, steady, enduring. It was a symbol of honest labor, of dignity and pride. But Daniel's face showed hesitation. In that instant, I saw again the little boy who once begged to hold it and asked, "When do I get to keep it, Dad?" And then that memory dissolved. Before I could speak, Vanessa leaned closer, her eyes glittering with false charm. "Oh, how vintage," she said. "Just like everything else in this house, outdated and worthless." The word vintage hung in the air like a blade. The light in Daniel's eyes dimmed. He glanced at Vanessa, then gently pushed the box back toward me. "That's touching, Dad," he said coolly, "but I don't need a watch to know your time is over." The air thickened. The music turned sharp, mocking. I looked straight at him, not with anger, but with the quiet gaze of someone who had given his life for him. The son I once knew was gone. In his place stood a stranger, molded by greed and ingratitude. I closed the lid. The soft click was the sound of blood ties snapping. Setting the box down beside my untouched tea, I said quietly, "Son, if you want freedom, let's see if you have the strength to stand without someone behind you." I turned and walked away. The crowd parted instinctively. No one spoke. I stopped by Margaret's portrait on the wall and gently touched the wooden frame. "I kept my word, Margaret." When I stepped outside, the Charleston night wind cut cold against my face. The air smelled of rain and old wood, just like the days when my hands built this house brick by brick. Inside, Vanessa quickly regained her role as hostess. "Oh, how dramatic! Come on, everyone, more wine!" she cried, her voice shrill and fake, making the room almost comical. After a brief pause, Daniel raised his glass. The two glasses met clink, like shackles binding two people certain of their victory. A few minutes later, 3 sharp knocks struck the door, firm and deliberate, like the hammer of justice. The door swung open. Red and blue lights flashed. 2 police officers stepped in, guns drawn. "Daniel Lawson," one shouted, "you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement." Vanessa screamed and hid behind a guest. Daniel's face drained of color. His wineglass slipped from his hand and shattered on the wooden floor. "What's happening, Dad? What did you do?" he yelled. I didn't answer. I stood on the porch, watching through the glass. The flashing lights reflected in my eyes not as satisfaction, but as closure. "Margaret," I whispered. I kept my word. Amid the spilled wine and broken glass, the Elgin watch still ticked steady and shining in the chaos, enduring like time itself, and like the love of a man who believed in family until his final breath. Before I tell you how a forgotten old man managed to turn the tables, tell me, where are you listening to this story from? And don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe that respect for the elderly is something that should never be negotiable. 43 years of memories came flooding back. This house has always had its own sound. Once, it was a symphony of life. The soft footsteps on the wooden floor, the clinking of a spoon against a porcelain cup, and Margaret's laughter whenever she added too much salt to her cooking. Now, the silence is no longer peace. It is heavy, dense, echoing through every corner like the sound of emptiness repeating itself inside a house far too large for one person. Many nights, I could swear I still hear the faint shuffle of her fabric slippers gliding through the hallway, but then I realize it's only the echo of my own heartbeat inside my chest. Every morning I wake feels like a small betrayal. For half a second, I still think she's lying beside me, her silver hair glowing in the morning light. But when my hand reaches over, it finds nothing but the cold, empty side of the bed. And just like that, reality returns cold, merciless, undeniable. I still keep the habit of turning on the old TV every morning, letting the sound of cooking shows fill the space so it feels like someone is home. I make 2 cups of coffee, one of them always growing cold beside the empty chair. These small habits serve no real purpose now, except to help me believe the house is still breathing. I fear that one day, the silence will swallow the last of our memories. The kitchen table we bought after our wedding is still there. The wood has grown smooth with time, each tiny scratch holding a story. I remember the day Margaret ran her hand along the grain, her eyes bright with joy. "This is it, Henry," she said. "This is where our family begins." And she was right. Daniel grew up around that table, birthdays, Christmases, nights of fever when I carried him around the house until dawn. Now I still sit there, across from the empty chair, letting silence become my only companion. In the living room, I still see her, or at least her shadow, curled up on the old sofa, wrapped in the colorful knit blanket she made by hand. Beside her, the bookshelf remains open to the unfinished page of the novel she never completed. In the hallway, the pencil marks measuring Daniel's height are still etched into the wall, each year carved into memory. I've never had the courage to erase them. In the corner of my workshop, patches of dried paint remain from the day she stood watching me repair an old fan, her hands on her hips as she laughed. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Each time I pass our bed, I gently pull the blanket over her side, afraid she might be cold. Every Sunday, I place a fresh flower on the dining table, not for decoration, but as a quiet way of saying, "You're still here." The garden is the most sacred place of all. Margaret had a gift for bringing life to everything she touched. She spoke to the plants as if they were family. She knew the name of every flower, every little bird that came to rest on the porch. After she was gone, I tried to take care of it, pulling weeds, watering, trimming, but my rough, calloused hands could never be as gentle as hers. This year, fewer flowers have bloomed. Perhaps they too have grown weary of waiting for the one who's gone. Sometimes, when I hear the birds sing, I remember that the world outside still moves on. It's only me who stands still. Whenever the wind brushes through the trees, I almost hear her laugh, so fragile I fear it would vanish if I breathed too hard. She used to believe that the souls of the departed lived within the wind, so every time the curtains stir softly, I lift my head and whisper, "I'm here, Margaret." And in my memory, I always hear her reply, "I'm here too, Henry, you just can't see me." On my desk still lies the unfinished note she left. By the time you read this, I'll be in a place where pain no longer exists. I've never read beyond that line. Some words don't need an ending, they continue through memory. At times, I still catch the faint scent of her Sunday pancakes, or find a candy tucked in my toolbox. The ones she used to say were, "for the grumpy old man." I leave everything exactly where it's always been, afraid that moving even one item might shatter the fragile world that remains. At night, the house begins to breathe. The wooden frame creaks like the sighs of memory. The old pendulum clock in the hallway still swings, not just counting time, but counting down the days until I see her again. Sometimes, I open the door and step into the garden, look up at the sky, and think, if the wind blows just a little harder, maybe I'll let it carry me away. But then I go back inside and change the water in her favorite vase, even if it's only for the dried roses from last year. Keeping them alive in memory is my way of staying alive. Every morning, I draw the curtains open so sunlight can fall over the empty chair, as if she might return at any moment. I am an old man anchored to the past, my soul bound to the bricks of this house. To me it's more than wood and nails, it's the last piece of Margaret still existing in this world. This house stands as a testament to the vow we once made, the promise to stay together for life, and I know I will spend the rest of my days here, among the echoes of our memories, peacefully waiting for the day I see her again. I had no idea that my quiet loneliness was about to be violated, that the very foundation of my world was about to tremble from a betrayal I could never have imagined. The silence of my home would no longer be a refuge. It was about to become a battlefield, where every brick and every memory would be put on trial under the names of modernization and reality. The one who led this siege always appeared gentle, soft-spoken, and sweet as honey. But every time Vanessa smiled, I could almost hear a beast growling behind that red lipstick. When she placed her hand on my shoulder, light as comfort, it felt instead like a cold mark of possession and control. It all began with Vanessa, my son Daniel's wife. She entered my life with a sweet smile and a voice so smooth it bordered on artificial. Every time she said, "You just rest, Dad, let me take care of it," I could almost hear the faint hiss of something dangerous hiding behind her painted lips. Her concern was never direct. It was wrapped in a velvety tone, slippery and hard to grasp. "Dad, older people tend to forget things easily. Why don't I manage your accounts? It'll be more convenient. Let me adjust this a little, make it more modern. The house should reflect the new era, don't you think?" I don't know when my house became our house. That word "our," it sounded sweet, but it burned, because I knew in that "our" there was no place for me. Vanessa's first target was Margaret's garden. She stood on the newly polished stone patio, looking down at the flower beds Margaret once tended so lovingly, and said brightly, "Did you know, Dad, I read in a magazine that low-maintenance gardens can raise resale value by up to 15%? Saves water, eco-friendly, it's the responsible choice." She said it as though Margaret's love for flowers was some outdated mistake in need of correction. The next day, the landscaping crew she hired arrived. They trimmed away every last rose bush Margaret had planted. The scent of wet soil and freshly cut petals followed me all the way into the kitchen. When I asked her about it, Vanessa just smiled. "They'll grow back prettier, Henry." But I knew some things, once cut, never grow back. Inside the house, she continued, the wooden furniture I had built with my own hands, the pieces that had been part of our lives, were called heavy and outdated. Vanessa brought catalogs filled with glossy, sterile designs that looked like hospital waiting rooms. "I just want the space to feel brighter, lighter. You'll feel so much better, Dad." One afternoon, I came home to find 2 workers removing the old wooden windows Margaret used to polish every morning. Vanessa said flatly, "I thought you agreed already." On the wall, our wedding photo had been replaced by a lifeless abstract painting. That night, I quietly took the old frame and put it back. By morning, it was gone. I didn't need to ask who had removed it. Vanessa liked to say "we" whenever she spoke of plans. "This neighborhood is booming. The house down the street sold for a fortune. We should take advantage of the opportunity." She said "we," but her eyes saw only money. To her, The house wasn't a home. It was an asset, a stepping stone to status. I chose silence. Not out of fear, but dignity. Yet I began to realize that every suggestion she made was another form of denial. Every help she offered was another piece of authority taken away from me. Margaret once told me, "Words can kill too," so I swallowed my anger and watched quietly. Then came the day Vanessa installed security cameras throughout the house, even in my workshop, where I, an HVAC-R technician, still kept my tools and occasionally repaired things for neighbors. When I asked why, she feigned innocence. "I just want to make sure you're safe, Dad. If you ever fall or have an accident, I'll know right away." Her voice was tender, but her eyes inspected me as if I were the one under surveillance. That night, I confronted Daniel. He only sighed and looked away. Vanessa cried, saying I was being paranoid, and buried her face in his shoulder like a wounded child. The scene made me feel like I was the guilty one, but deep down, I knew this was no longer my home. I began to doubt my own memory. Sometimes I thought maybe I was getting old, forgetful, too stubbornly attached to the past. But then I remembered what Margaret once said: "Be careful of anyone who says they want to change everything for your own good. They rarely want to help you, they want to replace you." Margaret's room became Vanessa's final project. She called it the Energy Renewal Room. The walls were painted stark white, and a huge mirror was mounted opposite the window. "Much more positive energy, Henry. Natural light makes you feel happier," she said while yanking down the curtains Margaret had chosen herself. That light, instead of cheering me, only made the memories fade faster. That night, I hid what little of Margaret I still had: her wedding ring, a few dried roses, a small photograph tucked into my toolbox among rusted nails. I wrote in my notebook, "She's erasing you, Margaret, piece by piece, but I'll remember, even if I must remember in the dark." When I complained, Daniel only replied tiredly, "Vanessa's just trying to help, Dad. Don't be so difficult." And one evening, when she thought I couldn't hear, I caught Vanessa whispering to him, "Sweetheart, I think your dad's starting to lose it. Just get him to sign, that's all we need." I heard every word. That night, I opened the safe. The documents were still there. At least the past was intact, but through the window, I saw Vanessa cutting Margaret's last rose and placing it into a crystal vase. I understood then. The war had truly begun. Vanessa didn't strike fast. She eroded slowly. She knew how to make me doubt myself, how to make Daniel see me as a burden. She used the language of practicality, of care, of modernity to disguise her greed. To the outside world, she was the devoted daughter-in-law helping an old man in his loneliness. But to me, she was the hand that wiped away the final traces of love. And I knew, if I didn't act soon, everything Margaret and I had built would disappear, not in a blaze, but through quiet, careful cuts, each hidden behind a gentle smile concealing a blade. I remember that afternoon clearly. The sunlight slanted through the workshop window, splitting the small room into two halves of light and shadow. I was fumbling with repairs on an old rocking chair, the one Margaret used to sit in while reading to Daniel every night when he was little. Each tap of the hammer against the wood sounded soft, steady like my heartbeat, until the door opened. Daniel stood there. A strip of sunlight ran down the floor, lying between father and son like a referee's chalk line. He didn't greet me. He just set a thick stack of brochures on the table. His shirt carried the faint scent of Vanessa's perfume, cold, luxurious, and unfamiliar. On his wrist, a shiny new watch caught the light, so different from the old Elgin I still kept in my room. "Dad, we need to talk," he began, his tone formal, as if he had practiced in front of a mirror. "I'm listening." I set the hammer down slowly and wiped my hands on a rag. He opened the packet of flyers, his voice even. "Vanessa and I looked into a few places. There's one called Oakwood Senior Living. Honestly, it's more like a resort than a nursing home. Pool, community activities, chef-prepared meals. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." Each word landed like a presentation slide: amenities, optimization, asset life cycle. I took a deep breath. "I don't want to go to any retirement community, Daniel. I want to live in my own house." He sighed, his voice tinged with irritation. "You're so stubborn, Dad. This house is a burden. Taxes, maintenance, expenses. We're just trying to help you." "We are." There it was again, we like a dull knife stabbed into the same spot over and over. I looked up, meeting his eyes. "I've taken care of this house myself for over 40 years. I can still manage." He shot back immediately. "And that's exactly why you're suffering. Vanessa's right, sell the house. We'll get you a small condo, no upkeep. The rest we can invest. Plan for the future. For the kids. For your grandkids." I looked at my calloused hands, then at the fresh nick where his hammer had slipped against the chair arm, a small mark, yet it felt like a memory had just been overwritten with cold steel. "The most dangerous thing," I said quietly, "is having to guard your own wallet even while living among your family." Daniel frowned. "Don't say that, Dad. I'm only thinking of you. You're here alone. It's dangerous." I clenched my hand. "If you start by burying your mother's memories, where exactly are you starting from?" He let out a dry laugh. "Legacy doesn't pay the bills, Dad. This house is worth millions, and it's not generating a return." I went still. To him, Margaret's garden was a losing investment. My house, the container of a lifetime of memories, was now measured by interest rates. "I laid every brick and drove every nail in this house," I said slowly. "I did that so your mother and you would have a home. And now you stand here and call it an asset." He avoided my gaze, his tone slipping into coldness. "You're being too emotional. This isn't about the past. It's about the future. Vanessa and I want children. We need good schools. The capital locked in your house can guarantee that." "Enough," I said, my voice beginning to weigh heavy. "These are all your mother's memories, not assets to be sold." Daniel suddenly exploded. "You always use Mom to make me feel guilty. This is about the living, about me, about my wife. We are your family now." Those words hung in the air, heavy as lead. I didn't argue. I only said softly, "That isn't your voice. That's Vanessa's." His face flushed. "You're always the bottleneck at your old job, and in this house." I looked straight into his eyes, my voice cold. "A one-man family council. I veto." Then he said the thing that shattered everything. "This house is worth more than your remaining life expectancy." The room seemed to freeze over. I answered slowly, "Go on, Daniel. Keep talking until you reach a point you can't return from." He gripped the phone in his hand. In the glass of the wooden cabinet, I saw a reflection of light from the screen, a photo of the rocking chair, just sent to someone. Along the edge of a brochure page, a coffee smear revealed the clear fingerprint of Vanessa. A chill ran down my spine. I went quickly upstairs, opened the cupboard to take the safe key, but the key's blade slipped from the groove. The ball-bearing lock had been loosened. Someone had tampered with it. I stood still for a few seconds, then turned back toward the workshop to ask. But when I neared the corner, I stopped. On the floor lay the wood-carving knife I had given Daniel when he was 13, its steel blade now rusted. I bent down and touched the handle, ice cold, and in that moment, I understood. Perhaps the bond between father and son had rusted too, like that very blade. I looked at the torn brochure scrap left on the table, picked it up, and tried lighting it. The paper caught very fast. I snuffed it out immediately, smoke curling in a thin ring. Some things need to burn, but not today. I flipped through the folder Daniel had forgotten. On the cover it read, "Lawson House on King Street proposed renovation." The 3D render showed a bright blue pool laid right over Margaret's rose garden. In the bottom corner, the contractor's logo bore a surname matching Vanessa's. On the back of the appraiser's business card, 3 words were penciled hastily. Clear title, first. I pulled out a thick envelope that had been mailed to the house, addressed to Daniel. Inside was an additional card printed with the name Vanessa L. On the cover of an unfamiliar bank file, a line stood out. Henry Lawson and Daniel Lawson joint account. I had never co-signed anything with anyone but Margaret. Just then, the back door clicked open. Daniel came back in, phone in hand, and froze when he saw the papers lying under the light. 2 seconds passed in silence, heavy as lead. The lawyer said if we have legal power of attorney, it'll be easier for you, he said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. I just want to help speed up your paperwork. And I looked straight into his eyes. Help me, huh? My voice was hoarse but firm, each word dropping like dry wood. I do not grant power of attorney. Not today, not ever. I set the phone down on the table, the thud echoing through the room like a full stop to all pretense. From this sentence forward, I said slowly, everything will be remembered correctly. Daniel pressed his lips together and kicked the box of nails. Nails scattered across the floor like the years I had laid down to raise him. He lifted the rocking chair and tried to rock it. The creak sounded dry, like Margaret turning in her grave. I turned my back, pulled on my gloves, and went back to work. This time, each stroke of sandpaper across the wood was no longer a repair, it was a declaration of war. The door slammed as he left. Sawdust fell like ash after a cremation no one witnessed. I dialed the old voicemail that still held Margaret's voice and left a short message. I've lost one round, Margaret, but I haven't given up. I laid my hand on the back of the rocking chair and whispered, if they begin here, then I'll end it here. After that day, every layer of pretense fell away. The house split into two battle lines, me and them. Daniel still came by, but it was no longer to visit his father. It was to inspect. With each step he took through the house, his gaze resembled that of an appraiser more than a son. Vanessa followed behind, smiling lightly, inquiring in a voice sweetened with calculation. I began to take note. The appraiser's business card lying on the kitchen table, the pool schematics, the thick envelopes delivered to Lawson House. Daniel's phone always face down, and a newly installed camera aimed straight at my workshop. Then I understood this was no longer a family argument. This was a war. And I, Henry Lawson, the man who set each brick of this house with my own hands, had no intention of surrendering. They were waiting for me to weaken, to turn me into a problem that could be solved with a brokerage contract and a moving truck. After that argument in the workshop, everything in the house grew quieter, but it was not peace. It was the silence of scheming mind. I could feel something shifting beneath the familiar surface of the house, like underground water before a storm. The first signs came from small things. Amid the usual mail bills, magazines, flyers, there began to appear thick, glossy envelopes addressed to Daniel Lawson, yet delivered to Lawson House on King Street, my own address. The logos in the corner belonged to financial firms, investment funds, even banks from other states. When I asked Daniel, he brushed it off casually. I just use this address for convenience, Dad. They need a stable address for credit records. It's more professional that way. His tone was confident, the answer too smooth, like a script rehearsed in advance. It sounded reasonable, but inside, I felt something cold and wrong. Daniel already had his own house. So, why were his financial documents tied to mine? Then it hit me, each of those envelopes was like an invisible thread, slowly weaving Daniel's finances into the foundation of the house Margaret and I built. The more I looked, the clearer it became. He was staking his claim, planting his flag right on the soil of my memories. Then came the phone calls. Daniel began handling business in my house, quiet, fast, careful. I overheard fragments of familiar financial terms: contracts, disbursement, transfer, limit, interest rate. Every time I entered the room, he immediately changed his tone. No problem, just email me the final draft. I'll review and reply. Then he'd hang up and force a smile. Just work stuff, Dad. I've got a lot of projects lately. But I know the sound of someone hiding something. He didn't sound like a man doing business. He sounded like someone rearranging a chessboard, piece by piece, carefully ensuring I couldn't see where his hands were moving. One morning, while searching for old tax documents in my desk, I accidentally found a misplaced folder. A gray cover, no label, but inside were architectural blueprints. I opened it and my heart nearly stopped. The drawings showed the entire house redesigned. My workshop gone, replaced by a two-car garage. The living room walls knocked down, turned into a luxurious master suite. The backyard, Margaret's garden, erased, replaced by a bean-shaped pool. I stared at the blueprints for a long time, feeling the cold crawl through me. They didn't just plan to renovate the house. They were redrawing my entire life, erasing the past to build a new future on its ruins. I put the plans back, my hands trembling slightly. From that moment, I knew for certain they were preparing something big. I just didn't know when or how. Time moved slowly after that. Each day felt scripted. Daniel still visited, and Vanessa still smiled her practiced smile, asking, "Do you need anything, Dad?" But her eyes never rested on me. They scanned the walls, the windows, the furniture as though she were appraising them. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the real sign appeared. Not through words, not through an argument, through an envelope. That morning, the wind from the Charleston River blew across the porch, carrying the scent of honeysuckle. I followed my routine, made coffee, read the paper, and at 10 o'clock walked out to check the mail. That mailbox at the gate was my last ritual, a small act that made me feel I still had a place in the world. I opened it and sorted through the usual: utility bills, a card from an old friend, a few travel brochures. Then, among the pile, there it was, a thick cream-colored envelope, embossed in the corner, Harborview Federal Bank. I had never heard that name before. My first feeling was suspicion. 43 years in the HVAC trade, I had only ever dealt with the local credit union where everyone knew Margaret, knew me, even knew our old dog. But Harborview Federal, it sounded distant, corporate, cold. The name reeked more of conglomerate than community. I almost threw it away. Probably one of those predatory letters that target the elderly, the cash out your home scams I'd seen 1,000 times. But when my finger touched the envelope, something stopped me. The paper was thick, the seal crisp, and the name printed in the center, Henry Lawson. Not Daniel, not Vanessa, me. I froze for a few seconds. Suddenly, all the scattered pieces began to fit together. The hushed phone calls, the financial mail sent here, the renovation plans, and now, an unfamiliar bank envelope addressed directly to me. I knew then this wasn't junk mail. It was something else. Something that would change everything from this moment on. I stepped into the house with the envelope in my hand, the key jammed halfway in the lock, as if even the house itself hesitated to let me in. In the silence, only the pendulum clock ticked steadily, and the refrigerator hummed each sound, counting down to the moment I was about to lose everything. I sat down in my familiar chair at the kitchen table. The chair gave a thin creak, as if warning me, "Don't open it." In front of me lay the cream-colored envelope, clearly printed with my name and address. Everything was still in my name, and yet, suddenly, I felt as though nothing here belonged to me anymore. I put on my glasses, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to stay calm. The cold scent of ink and fresh paper rose up, the smell of money, but not mine. I slid a butter knife under the seal. The paper tore with a sound like a wound opening. Inside was a folded stack of documents, the heading printed in bold: Home Equity Line of Credit, Final Disbursement Notice. I froze. A home equity loan, something I had never taken. This house had been paid off long ago. Margaret and I had burned the old mortgage papers in the backyard, celebrating it as our day of freedom. I told myself it had to be a mistake, but as I read further, that hope died instantly. Dear Mr. Henry Lawson, the final disbursement from Home Equity Credit account ending in 7,854 has been completed. My name appeared clearly, the account number, and then the line that cut like steel. Borrower, Henry Lawson. Co-borrower, Daniel Lawson. Collateral, Lawson House on King Street, Charleston, SC. Lien recorded. County Recorder Number B, 196473. Below it, the figures were laid out neatly and mercilessly, like an autopsy report. Total credit limit, $350,000. Amount disbursed, $258,723.50. Available balance, $1,376.50. The gap between those two numbers was the distance between me and my son. Setup fee, $795. Appraisal fee, $575. Processing fee, $310. Adjustable interest rate, 9.25%. Date, signed, 7/15, my wedding anniversary with Margaret. Whoever chose that date did it on purpose. They knew exactly how sacred it once was. And at the bottom, the final blow. This notice confirms final disbursement and lien perfection. The return address, P.O. Box, Jacksonville, Florida. Not my town. Not a place I had ever been. Then came the final warning, cold as a verdict. In case of default, lender may accelerate full balance and initiate foreclosure. Foreclosure. Seizing the house. One word longer, heavier than every apology Daniel had ever spoken. I immediately called the number on the letter. A woman's voice, calm and procedural, answered, "Please confirm the last 4 digits of your SSN." I stayed silent. She continued, "According to our records, there's a power of attorney submitted by Daniel Lawson last week." My grip on the receiver tightened. I never signed a power of attorney. Note this down. Signature dispute. Suspected forgery. I called Daniel. "Dad, calm down," he said smoothly. "I'll handle it. It's just a financial strategy. You don't understand." His voice was slick, rehearsed the same tone he used when selling something. I answered coldly, "What kind of strategy uses a forged signature on your father's house?" He said nothing, then hung up. I called the bank again and demanded, "Freeze the account, audit all transaction history, and provide every voice recording and video used for signature verification." I knew from that moment on every word needed to be on record. On the table, the bank letter lay across Margaret's photo. The numbers cast shadows across her smile like boot prints over a grave. She once told me, "Don't sign anything when your hand trembles." Today, I hadn't signed, but someone had signed for my trembling. I gathered all the documents, photographed everything, saved them onto a USB drive, and labeled it Harborview Evidence Yedden. Then I wrote my list of actions. Freeze HELOC. Request fraud affidavit. Dispute lien. Contact county recorder's office. Verify original signature with previous bank. Locate notary in Jacksonville. In the trash I found a small receipt. Notary fee, $20. The ink matched the kind of pen Daniel always used. I crushed the paper in my hand until it crumpled. This was no longer just a letter. It was a declaration of war. And I, Henry Lawson, the last man of this family, was officially answering the call. I spent the entire night going over every line in the documents. There was no longer any doubt. Every trace led to the same conclusion. At the bottom of the final page, the name Henry Lawson appeared, disturbingly familiar. But it wasn't mine. The H was too round, the slant was wrong, and the L lacked the small upward flick I always left at the end. The spacing between letters was perfectly even, cold and mechanical. In the lower corner, there was even a faint smudge of a fingerprint blurred by sweat. I had never signed anything without wiping my hands first. I enlarged the scanned file, comparing it to my genuine signature from old insurance papers and bank records. Every stroke revealed the differences. Whoever did this knew me well enough to imitate, but not well enough to hide their mistake. The transaction record stated clearly, disbursement #2, $53,000, City National Bank joint account, Daniel and Vanessa Lawson. Collateral, 100% ownership of Lawson House, King Street, Charleston. Date signed, 7/15, the same date again. The notary seal was from Jacksonville, Florida, bearing the same name as the person who had notarized documents for Vanessa's mother years ago. I quickly searched the name in the state notary database. The file appeared, but the registration number had been altered, missing the last 2 digits. There was no longer any room for doubt. I reopened the recorded call with the bank, then sent all the evidence to their internal investigation department, along with a formal complaint to the Florida Notary Board. In the email, I wrote simply, "Forgery confirmed. Request full audit trail and IP logs." A part of me still hoped it was some mistake, but every detail was intentional, from the date to the mailing address to the typeface on the contract. I went to the cabinet and retrieved Margaret's old files. She had kept every property deed, along with a copy of my signature from our final mortgage release. Placing the two sheets side by side, I knew I was staring at the crime of my own son. No anger remained, only emptiness. When Margaret died, I thought I had learned what loss truly meant. But losing faith, that is the real kind of death. I labeled a new folder, Case Lawson Evidence 01, Forgery. The plan was now clear. Verify signature samples at the previous bank. Submit fraud report to the federal agency. Contact the county recorder's office to block any transfer. Prepare a meeting with the attorney. I looked around the kitchen. The place where I once brewed morning coffee had become a forensic station. The wooden table once for family dinners was now the autopsy table for my dignity. I lifted my wedding ring and tapped it gently on the wood. The sound was dry and cold. Margaret once said, "When someone touches your name, it's no longer about money." Now, they had touched my name itself, and I would make sure they remembered it for the rest of their lives. The shock had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it almost roared. I took a long breath, then stood up. My hand brushed against the hardened callus at the base of my finger. The sharp sting brought me back to reality, back to a cold and lucid state of mind. Margaret used to say that justice doesn't need shouting, it needs evidence. And tonight, I would begin laying the foundation for that justice. I was born an HVAC/R technician, a man who spent his life working with systems, pressure, and balance. When a pipe cracked, I didn't complain. I found the cause, chose the right tool, and welded it tighter than before. This time was no different, except the broken pipeline was my own family. I cleared the table. Each document was lined up neatly. I opened the first folder, Evidence 01, HELOC, the Harborview Bank letter. The second, Evidence 02, Forgery, the falsified contract, and the Jacksonville notary seal. Then I added a third, Evidence 03, mail divided by forward redirected envelopes and suspicious Florida addresses. The desk lamp glared against the paper edges. I photographed every page carefully, placing a steel ruler at the corner for scale. On graph paper, I drew a timeline, dates and times of letters on the left, the names of those involved on the right: Daniel, Vanessa, the notary, the bank, the mail carrier. Each connection I marked in red pen like a technician pinpointing leaks in a pressure system. On the wall, I taped notes. POA, Request Original. Lien B196473 Verify County Recorder. Audit Trail need IP and voice logs. Every sheet was sealed with clear tape, edges neat, my initials crossing over the seam. I logged the sealing time, then created two backups, one USB hidden in the toolbox in the workshop, and another copy locked in a rented post office safe. I called the mail carrier, asking about the most recent delivery. He remembered, a man named Daniel Lawson signed for it. I wrote down every word, every detail, as if documenting a technical malfunction. When my hands stopped shaking, I wrote the first line in my notebook. Anything not recorded is as if it never existed. From that moment, every signature I made would be in blue ink. On the front of my case file, I labeled it Case Lawson Harborview 75454FD. Below it, I taped a checklist, the action plan of a man ready for battle. Freeze HELOC. Submit fraud affidavit. Request audit trail, voice divided by IP. Obtain certified copy county recorder. File notary complaint Florida. Initiate credit freeze all three bureaus. I printed a spoliation notice, demanding preservation of all data, emails, CCTV, voice logs, IP access. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Any data deleted after this notice will be considered intentional destruction of evidence." I paused, looking around the house. It was no longer a home, it had become a war room. My old kitchen now looked like the office of a man preparing for the front line. Papers, light, and an old technician rebuilding the framework of his life. I opened a drawer, took out my voice recorder, checked the battery 100%. I slipped it into my inner pocket, beside a blue pen and a small steel hammer, a habit from my trade I never abandoned. Step 1, freeze the money. Step 2, expose the forgery. Step 3, open the courthouse doors. I whispered the 3 steps to myself. The light from the window fell across Margaret's framed photo on the wall. I didn't need words, I knew she would understand. I nodded slightly, then closed the folder. I put on my dark gray vest, cold, but solid, like a layer of concrete armor. The click of my shoes on the tile floor sounded dry and deliberate, like a gavel striking wood. I opened the cabinet and took out my worn leather briefcase. Inside were my passport, driver's license, property deed, and the case file bearing my name. On top lay the letter from Harborview Federal Bank, the blueprint of betrayal, now turned into the foundation of justice. I pulled back the curtain. Sunlight poured into the room, not bright, but sharp and clear, like a worksite lamp switched on at dawn. I looked at my reflection in the glass, a face lined with years, but eyes steady and alert. "No more tears," I whispered. "Only reports." Then I stepped outside. Charleston was waking to a new morning. For them, it was an ordinary day. For me, it was the day I began to fight for justice. I started the old car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, with one destination in mind: Harborview Federal Bank. As I stepped through the revolving doors, the air conditioning hit my face cold, sterile, like stepping into another planet's climate. The rhythmic tapping of keyboards filled the room, punctuated by empty "yes, sir," voices that echoed like prayers in a hollow chapel. Here, I was no longer Henry Lawson, just a file flagged as an incident. The young receptionist looked up. "How can I help you, sir?" "I need to speak to the bank manager," I replied. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "About a fraudulent account opened in my name." The smile vanished from her face. She made a call. Minutes later, a middle-aged man appeared, Mr. Davies, straight tie, cold handshake. He led me into a glass-walled conference room. "Mr. Lawson," he began, "I understand you have concerns about an account. We can clear this up quickly." Good, I thought. Let him assume I'm just another confused old man. I opened my briefcase and laid the Harborview envelope on the table. He glanced over it, tapped on his keyboard. "HELOC. Lawson. The loan was processed correctly. Everything checks out." I slid my driver's license and passport toward him. "These are my real signatures. Now pull up the scanned signature you have on file." He did. 2 signatures appeared on screen, similar, but not the same. I pointed. "The H is too round. The stroke on the "lal" is missing its hook. The spacing is machine perfect. That is a forgery." His tone slowed. "Signatures can vary with age." "I haven't set foot in this bank in 73 years, I interrupted. "Charleston County records show my home has been debt-free for 11 years. So tell me, how did Harborview issue a $350,000 loan without my presence, and with a forged signature?" The color drained from his face. "I will open an internal investigation." "Good," I said evenly. "And that investigation starts with you providing every original file: the loan application, credit report, ID copies, signatures, access logs, voice recordings, KYC photos, Jacksonville notary seal, and disbursement history." "Mr. Lawson, our confidentiality policy doesn't allow—" "I understand," I cut in coldly. "But does your policy allow facilitating fraud? You have 2 options. 1, cooperate. 2, I file formal complaints with the FDIC, the South Carolina State Banking Commission, the Charleston Police Department, and the Florida Notary Board. My attorney is on standby. The choice is yours." Davies hesitated, then lifted the phone. "Jessica, cancel all meetings. Pull the complete Lawson HELOC file, include voice logs, notary record, IP access, and edit history." I sat upright, calm. While waiting, I jotted notes on a sticky pad. Case 1854 FD. Requests, full file, audit trail, lien document, recorder certified copy. Then I added, freeze entire credit line and flag fraud, issue fraud affidavit form. Print disbursement records, destination, City National Bank, joint account, Daniel and Vanessa Lawson, provide Florida IP access log, certified notary copy, name, registration number, signature, Lien package filed with recorder receipt number B196473. Jessica brought 2 thick folders. I put on my glasses, inspected each page, photographed everything, and requested a true copy stamp with the staff member's signature and title. The chain of custody had to be flawless. On the screen appeared the notarized signature from Jacksonville, along with the registry code. "I'll be obtaining my original signature sample from my local bank," I said. "The recorder's office will issue a certified lien record. If there's a power of attorney, I want both the original document and the voice recording authorizing it. Note this, POA repudiated." Davies swallowed hard. "We will cooperate." "Good. From now on, all communication is in writing. I'll be sending a spoliation notice, delete data, and it's a confession." An hour later, I received all the files, along with confirmation of the HELOC freeze and a case reference number. Davies extended his hand, but I didn't take it. "You'll hear from my attorney soon," I said calmly. Leaving the conference room, I walked through the lobby. The air-conditioned chill faded, giving way to the warm Charleston sunlight beyond the glass doors. I paused for a moment, gripping the handle of my briefcase. Inside it lay the first cornerstone of the legal fortress I was about to build. As I drove away, my mind was steady. The documents on the passenger seat were no longer just papers. They were weapons. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I was an HVACR technician, not a lawyer. I understood foundations, load, and pressure far better than legal clauses. I needed someone armed with words that could bite, someone who could navigate the maze of law and finance, and above all, someone I could trust completely. In my life, only one name stood firm like a pillar: Maria Rodriguez. Her father, Carlos, had been my closest friend since our youth. The last time I saw her was at his funeral, more than a year ago. From a public defender, Maria had become a banking fraud investigator, and later, a partner at a financial litigation firm. They called her the Z Hammer because she always struck straight at Regulation Z. 11 years ago, it was Maria who helped me negotiate Margaret's medical debt free of charge. She only said, "You can repay me later by living peacefully." Carlos had been a kindred soul. Maria was his light, and now I needed both of them. In my drawer, I still kept the steel ruler Carlos had given me, engraved with the initials Mr. I placed it atop the case file, as if inviting the child I once knew to return and fight beside me. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen before my case folders and a cup of cold coffee. Calling Maria meant building scaffolding around a house that was cracking, not to admire it, but to dismantle it safely. I asked myself, what price am I willing to pay? To save the house might mean losing my son. To save my son would mean losing the house and the Lawson name. Margaret once told me, if you ever have to choose between peace and truth, choose truth. Peace is counterfeit. I dialed Maria's number, then erased it 4 times. The 5th time, my hand no longer trembled. I had 10 days left before the interest adjustment. After that, the noose would tighten another notch. "Rodriguez and Associates, how may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice was calm and professional. "I need to speak with partner Maria Rodriguez regarding mortgage and identity fraud, urgent, today. My name is Henry Lawson." A brief pause. "Please hold, Mr. Lawson." Seconds later, a warm, familiar voice came through the line. "Henry, is that really you?" "It's me, Maria. How have you been?" "I'm managing," I said quietly. "It's good to hear your voice again," she murmured. "I still think about you and Margaret." I let that warmth linger for a breath, then spoke plainly. "This isn't a social call, Maria. I'm in trouble. I need a lawyer." Her tone shifted instantly, crisp, sharp, professional. "What kind of trouble? Are you safe?" "I'm fine," I said, "but my house isn't. It is not Phil 22,000. The 2022, the WRC, the 2010, of the Bod clan." I told her everything: the Harbor View Federal Bank letter, the $350,000 HELOC, the disbursement schedule, every detail as precisely as reading a blueprint. When I reached Daniel's name, my throat locked. I swallowed twice before finishing. They funneled the money into a joint account under Daniel and Vanessa. There was silence for a few seconds. Then her voice tightened. Say that again. Daniel, I repeated, and Vanessa. They mortgaged my house behind my back. That's impossible, she said under her breath, then regained her lawyer's tone. Details. Do you have originals and time-stamped photos? Yes. The signature under my name is forged. The H is too round, the L missing the hook. Her voice turned cold and concise. This is identity theft plus HELOC fraud plus bank compliance failure. We'll go two ways, civil and criminal. What have you done so far? I recounted the meeting with Mr. Davies and the duplicated file set. Every page copied clean, nothing redacted. Every page. Good. You did perfectly, Henry. From now on, no calls, no texts, no responses to Daniel or Vanessa. Stay silent and let them expose themselves. This afternoon, 2 p.m., meet me in the Fulton conference room. We'll open the engagement letter and retainer. I'll run a conflict check now if it's clear. We'll sign representation and issue a litigation hold to the bank. By evening, I'll file credit freezes with Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion for you. I need to keep my house in my name, I said. Objective 1. Keep the house. Objective 2. Freeze and claw back all disbursements. Bring these: lien number, funding ledger, KYC divided by KBA logs, notary journal page, and IP access trail. If any are missing, I'll compel disclosure. 3 immediate tasks. Freeze the HELOC, request a fraud affidavit, and get a certified copy of the lien from the recorder's office. Then she briefed me on operational security. Call only from your backup number. Do not use home Wi-Fi mobile data only. No emailing files. Bring printed copies and a USB. Wrap the USB in foil temporarily. Record your chain of custody at home. I wrote it down. Sealed at 1142 initials across tape custodian. Henry Lawson. Tonight change your locks, she added. Don't keep a spare under the flower pot. I'll have someone review your camera logs. If they call, say only, this call is being recorded, and follow with, all matters go through my attorney. Tomorrow they'll say it's a family misunderstanding and ask you to withdraw the complaint. Don't. That's the peace trap. I heard Maria exhale softly, then whisper to herself, almost reverently. They picked the wrong house to mortgage. This one was built on legal bedrock. Dad, I'm paying back my debt now. I gathered everything into my briefcase. The Harborview letter, lien number, disbursement ledger, forged signature scan, notary receipt, appraiser's business card, handwritten timeline, USB with photos, and the certified house deed. I sealed the envelope beneath Margaret's portrait. Bear witness for me, I whispered. 2 p.m. sharp, Fulton Building, Maria reminded. Be 10 minutes early. We sign, then act immediately. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. If justice required silence at the Christmas dinner table, I would trade it without hesitation. When I hung up, the weight on my chest hadn't lifted, but for the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone. I had an ally, I had a plan, and I had evidence. It was time to get to work. Rodriguez and Associates' office is on the 13th floor, looking straight out over the Charleston Harbor and the Ravenel Bridge. I receive a visitor badge. A ceiling corner camera pans lightly today. Not only words are being recorded. Inside is warm, focused, walls lined with law books, accented by a few low-country paintings. On Maria's desk there is only one photo, a little girl on Carlos's shoulders taken by me and the steel ruler engraved Mr. She turns it exactly 90 degrees, as if setting the guide for a surgical operation. Coffee, Henry? Warm voice, steel eyes. She pours the coffee, removes her ring, then opens the file. I slide the Harborview packet across. Thud, the first brick pulled from the foundation of deceit. An hour later, only the rustle of paper remains, a pen sliding over yellow legal pads. When we reach the copy of the forged signature, Maria shines a light on it. The upstroke has no hesitation point. A machine is smooth. A human hand always has a beat of doubt. She closes the folder. her eyes flaring cold. This isn't just fraud, it's targeted predation against an elderly family member. The Charleston County Solicitor's Office will care. She pulls the file back to the middle of the table. Good news. They're sloppy. The money trail is a mile long. Funds flowing straight into the joint account is the nail. But there'll be defenses like, you were confused, verbal consent, family arrangement. Our job, build a wall of truth, sturdy enough that every lie bounces off. We've got the what, a fraudulent loan. Now we need the why, the motive. We need to paint systematic greed, where the $350,000 went. She looks toward the horizon. Police are overloaded. We don't wait. We hire an investigator. You have someone you trust? Marcus Evans, former investigator, now private. Discreet, meticulous, knows how to dig where people try to bury. I want Daniel and Vanessa's finances stripped bare. Card statements, bank transactions, major purchases in recent months, new car, vacations, Vanessa's partners, sources of funds. Build a timeline. The locking strategy. Build a criminal case in steel from Evans's report, hand it to prosecutors to force charges. Facing felonies, their position collapses in civil court. We don't just claw back money, we want justice. It'll be expensive. Do it. I was hoping you'd say that. Absolute silence with them. Maria emphasizes each word. Let them think you're a grieving old man. While they celebrate, we work. Lay the file brick by brick. She grazes the photo with Carlos, whispering, don't paint over the crack, drill into the crack. 2 weeks stretch like 2 years. I play the role of lonely old man, watering the magnolia, paying bills, greeting neighbors. Behind the curtain, the machine of justice is roaring to life. Thursday afternoon, Maria calls, done. Marcus is finished. Can you come in tomorrow morning? The next morning, there's a third person in the conference room. Marcus Evans is in his 50s, presence bigger than his frame, the steady eyes of someone who has seen it all. He hands over his PI license, speaks succinctly. I clean signatures with data. In front of him is a thick black binder. He taps his pen 3 times a habit, signaling the start. 3 steps. 1. OSINT social media. LLC filings with the SC Secretary of State. 2. Subpoena light demand data from vendors, hotels. 3. Follow the money funding ledger wire merchant. Toolkit. RFID scanner, buttonhole camera, EXIF scrape app. Every photo Vanessa posts leaks coordinates. No contact with the targets. Let them keep spending where the money goes. The crime goes. He opens the file, a story told in images. First page. Vanessa stepping out of a white Lexus. Sunglasses perched on her head. Luxury bag in hand. Purchased 2 months ago. $68,000 wired from the joint account. The license plate reflects the dealership frontage. The 7/20 invoice matches the lot's camera. Statements. A $315 dinner downtown. A $1,380 spa. Gucci $4,460. Each receipt feels like another cut into my pension. I sit motionless, fingers laced tight. They're celebrating, Maria says softly. I nod. Next set. Plane tickets. Hotel confirmations. Restaurant bills. 4 weeks ago, 2 weeks in Europe. Marcus narrates evenly. Business class to Rome. 5-star in Amalfi. A few days on a Greek island. Photos from Vanessa's public account. The 2 of them glowing on a balcony over the sea, toasting, sun-browned. EXIF, the 22nd of July, 2025, 1723. Boarding passes match the Lawson names. Caption: an amazing husband gifted a dream trip, feeling blessed and grateful. Grateful to whom? Marcus says quietly, laying down a wire transfer dated 2 days earlier. One picture boasts of Paris rain, but the EXIF shows 32 degrees Celsius in Athens. Even magic leaves fingerprints. Final chapter. Vanessa Lawson Properties LLC filed 3 months ago with the SCSOS. Registered agent matches a law firm friendly with Vanessa. Business checking statement. $152,000 wired in 2 days after the HELOC's final disbursement. Ledger note. Seed capital. Clipped behind it, an interior staging invoice, a contractor agreement with Westline Construction, the same time frame the bean-shaped pool surfaced on the rendering. Marcus closes the binder. The trail is clear, no ambiguity. They took the money and this is how they spent it. I swallow nausea like swallowing nails. Nails hold a house. Misunderstandings, I say slowly, don't form LLCs and pour $152,000 into them. Maria nods. Identity theft, HELOC fraud, elder exploitation. Add UDAAP if the bank was sloppy. I don't need a jury to hate people. I need them to hate the universal rule of fraud. Money in on the exact day, in the exact place. What? She establishes the chain of custody right at the table, counts pages, notes the time, signs. Custodian of record, M. Rodriguez. Then she lays the legal footings. Criminal. File with the Charleston County Solicitor's Office. Financial crimes. Regulatory pressure. CFPB plus SC Board of Financial Institutions. Freeze and clawback. Freeze remaining HELOC. Clawback demand to City National Bank. Joint divided by LLC. Subpoenas. Lexus dealership. Hotel chains. Payment processors. Gucci divisé par Neyman, etc. Invoices plus video. SAR. Ask Harborview. Was a suspicious activity report filed? If not, red flag for prosecution. Civil. Fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment, constructive trust, lis pendens to block any assets purchased with HELOC funds. Home protection. Fraud alert at the recorder's office to block irregular deed activity. Maria places her hand on mine not to console, but to stamp. They didn't just steal money. They borrowed your name as leverage. Now we pull the lever and bring it down. And Henry will use the birthday party as the timeline anchor. Who was present, who toasted first, which photo was posted after timenails that lock every excuse. I leave the office with the black binder evens divided by finance in my briefcase. It isn't paper. It is justice. The police station was a world completely different from Maria's orderly law office. The security guard led me through the metal detector. The dry beep of the scanner echoed like a rubber stamp of approved. The hallway smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. A uniformed officer tapped his thumb against his body cam. The red light blinked once, then went dark. In this room, only the ceiling camera records, he said. Hard plastic chairs. Beige-gray walls. Here, family and emotion were stripped away, only the bare truth remained. We were escorted into a windowless interview room. A metal table, 3 chairs, a ceiling camera. Fluorescent light cut a sharp white line across the space like a surgical lamp. The hum of the air conditioner pulsed steadily, counting down time. I placed my wedding ring beside the recorder. "This is my witness," I said quietly. The door opened. Detective Miller walked in, tall, late 50s, eyes tired but sharp. A collared shirt, dark trousers. His handshake was brief. He sat, opened his notebook, and tapped his pen 3 times against the margin, the reflex of a man who always steadied himself before asking something that mattered. "Your attorney said you had something to report," he began. Maria set down her briefcase, voice firm and concise. "Felonies. Identity theft, HELOC fraud, and elder financial exploitation. Supporting evidence includes funding ledgers and photographic proof." She placed 2 folders, Harborview and Evans, side by side on the table. Miller's eyebrows lifted slightly. The weariness in his expression sharpened into focus. For over an hour, Maria presented the case methodically. From the Harborview Federal Bank letter, forged loan documents, to the financial trail Marcus Evans had reconstructed, the white Lexus, luxury statements, the European trip. Miller took furious notes. Skepticism turned to astonishment, then to a silent, measured anger. When he reached the photo of the Lexus, he tapped his pen. "The plate reflection off the showroom glass, the lot's video feed will lock the purchase time." Maria pointed to the Amalfi EXIF timestamp, the 22nd of July 2025, 1723, the wire transfer 48 hours earlier. "Timestamps seal every excuse shut," she said. On the yellow pad, she sketched a flowchart. HELOC joint account. Daniel, Vanessa, LLC, seed capital. She circled one restaurant bill, $315. That marks the dinner witness, she said. From time to time, Miller questioned me directly. Before receiving the letter, did you know your son had access to your financial records? No. Did you ever authorize the use of your home equity or mortgage for his benefit? Never. The house is his after I'm gone, not before. I looked him in the eye, voice steady. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came to report a crime. When Miller reached the $152,000 transfer into Vanessa Lawson Properties LLC, he leaned back, let out a low whistle. 22 years on the force, I've seen family tragedies, he said. But this is clean, calculated, a profit plan built on someone else's name. He began the protocol. Maria read the page count. Miller affixed evidence seals, noting the time and signature. Custodian, Lieutenant Miller. Then he tore off a receipt, slid it toward me. Case number 2, 5CH1, 194. From now on, everything moves under this number. How old are you, Mr. Lawson? Any recent medical reports? He was checking the elder abuse criteria. 73. Have you ever signed a power of attorney for Daniel or Vanessa? No, never. Miller drew a red line across the report. Sign a live sample here, blue ink, he instructed. We'll send it for forensic comparison with the loan signature. Maria added, the upstrokes are uniformly wrong. Notarization occurred in Jacksonville, Florida, though the complainant has never set foot there. Miller nodded. I'm opening the case now. Within 24 hours, subpoena the bank's video footage, notary records, KYC, and voice logs. Ask Harborview if they filed a SAR. If not, mark it bright red for FinCEN. He issued a caution. From this point on, do not discuss the case over personal phone calls. If they reach out, simply say, all communication goes through the police and my attorney. The quieter you stay, the more they'll talk, and talking is self-incrimination. Maria added, I'll send a no-contact letter to Daniel and Vanessa. If they show up at your house, don't open the door. Call 911 and cite case number 25CH1194. Miller continued, place a credit freeze at all 3 bureaus, and a fraud alert with the recorder's office to block any deed alterations. He reviewed every point as if assembling a case file in his mind. Then he looked up directly at me. Mr. Lawson, I'll need your formal statement. Start from the beginning, every conversation, letter, phone call, every detail you remember. The recorder clicked on. I told everything from Margaret, the house on King Street, the love I had for my son, to the day Daniel vanished and left behind a stranger. I recounted the workshop confrontation, the letter, Maria nothing omitted. It was the hardest story I'd ever had to tell. When I finished, Miller stopped the recording. Thank you. That wasn't easy, he said quietly. He turned to Maria. Your investigator gave us a perfect launch point. This is one of the most complete civil prep case files I've ever seen, prosecution ready on a silver platter. He rose from his chair. I'm opening a criminal investigation into Daniel Lawson and Vanessa Lawson for bank fraud, identity theft, and elder financial exploitation. I'll question Mr. Davies, subpoena the originals, and oversee Harborview's compliance. Our forensic team will verify Evans's findings, and I suspect they'll match. His gaze fell on the wedding ring beside the recorder. She would have wanted you to do this, he said. I promised to keep our home until my last breath, I replied. Today, I kept that promise. Miller pushed the report forward. Sign here. The case is officially open. Maria tapped the file cover lightly. We'll use the birthday party as our anchor in the timeline, she said. We shook hands and left the room. As I stepped out of that cold chamber and back into the noise of the lobby, I could feel the weight of what I'd just done, but this time, the weight had a case number and a path forward. Leaving the police station, I stepped outside carrying a weight that was both heavy and light-heavy, because I had placed a final period on fatherhood, and light because I had finally laid the first brick of justice. I knew that from the moment I signed my name on that report, nothing could ever return to what it once was. There was no joy, no sense of victory, only the cold, solid certainty, heavy as steel, that I had done the right thing. The machinery of justice had begun to move, and the first person it was aimed at was my own son. That night, the house felt hollow. No one greeted me except the wind whistling through the hallway and the faint smell of stale coffee lingering in the kitchen. I sat down in the chair and listened to the pendulum clock tick, each dry, mechanical strike like another nail being driven into the door of the past. Not the front door, but the one inside where fatherhood, sonship, and guilt had once crowded together. The week before Daniel's birthday stretched longer than a year. Everything in the house, the dishes, the curtains, the lights, the framed wedding photo of Margaret stood still, silently watching me wait for something no one ever wants to come. I wrote a row of numbers on a scrap of paper and taped it beside the pendulum clock. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Each morning, I crossed one out like a soldier counting down the days to battle. I knew that when the last number was gone, there would be no way back. To fill the emptiness, I went down to the workshop, tinkering with old air conditioners and refrigerators. The oil and machine grease clung to my hands, my hair, even my breath, that smell Margaret used to call the scent of time. A fragrance that comforted and warned at once, the smell of wear, of life dissolving by degrees. Sometimes I saw Daniel at 11 years old, in my memory sitting beside me in the shop, holding a hammer, eyes wide with excitement. "Dad, why do we measure 3 times before cutting once?" I'd told him, "Because one wrong cut turns steel into scrap." Now I finally understood some mistakes turn people into scrap too. Monday morning the phone rang. The caller ID, Maria Rodriguez. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that felt like the final verdict. "Mr. Lawson, the subpoena's been served on Harborview Federal Bank. Davies is cooperating. We have the original video." "And the signature?" "Confirmed. No forger's tremor, impossible to deny." "The notary?" "Leo Gallo, 7 aliases. Arrested in 2018 inches, Jacksonville. The same notary seal appears on the loan file." "So that means—" "It means everything's complete. You understand, don't you?" "I do," I said quietly. "Now it's my part. When the truth is already clear, silence is the only oath that carries weight." That afternoon, Detective Miller came by. He carried the faint smell of cigarettes and a folder of freshly printed papers. "We've closed 99% of the case," he said. "And the last 1%? I asked. "The final words. The sentence they'll stab themselves with, no one has to push." I understood. Those words could only be extracted in one place: Daniel's birthday party. "The party's being held at Lawson House, King Street," Miller said. "Go as usual. No confrontation. Pick a birthday gift that's deeply personal." "The watch," I said immediately. "Perfect," he nodded. "When you leave, that's the signal. We'll come in. No further promises, no dramatic farewells." I knew what it meant to turn the bond between father and son into evidence. That night, I turned the porch light on and off 3 times, a test signal. A van parked across the street with a cable company logo blinked its headlights once in reply. Everything was in place. I arranged the house carefully. Margaret's wedding photo set at the center, her armchair turned to face the door, the old rug spread flat, no wrinkles. I touched each lock, listening to the soft click of reassurance. At 9 o'clock, I made one last round through the house, checking lights, windows, switches. Everything had to be perfect. Once, when a delivery driver rang the wrong bell, my heart raced as if counting bullets in a loaded chamber. Close to midnight, the phone lit up. "Daniel Lawson, 017. I didn't answer. At that hour, there are only 2 kinds of callers: the afraid and the ones about to be. And I knew which one my son was. I glanced at the pendulum clock in the hallway, the minute hand past 12. Tick, tock, tick, tock, each beat like a scalpel. I whispered, "No one can forge time." Then I opened Margaret's old journal. Between the yellowed pages was a line she'd written in blue ink. "May God bless our son with an honest heart, hands that work, and a soul that knows repentance." The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. Wind from the Ashley River slipped through the cracks of the window, carrying damp mist that crept into every corner of the room. I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of the bed. The scent of aged wood and polish spread through the air like a ritual I had repeated for years. Inside lay the folded life of a man preserved in memory. Margaret's wedding dress, Daniel's childhood doodles, and a frayed photo album browned with time. Amid the velvet lining was the only thing I needed tonight, the old Elgin watch. I lifted it with both hands. The glass was cloudy, the gold rim faded, yet the second hand still moved steady, honest, and cold, like time itself. I wiped each groove of the casing with a velvet cloth, slow and precise, as though soothing a soul that had witnessed too much. The desk lamp reflected off the metal face, revealing my own, an old man with eyes as deep and still as ash, hands trembling slightly, yet with a heart emptied of all emotion. My father used to say, "A man is only as good as his word and his time. Never waste either." The words echoed through the room, sharp as splitting wood. I gripped the watch tighter, feeling the chill of metal seep into my skin. When he died, I took the watch from his wrist, placed it on the altar, and vowed to give it only to someone worthy. I never imagined that day would be today, the day I must hand it to the son who once impersonated his own father to steal the labor of a lifetime. I placed the watch on a white cloth and adjusted the time. The minute hand, the second hand, both aligned perfectly with the pendulum clock in the hallway. 3 full sweeps past 12 before calm finally returned. Each tick was a question no one could answer. When justice speaks, how much of love remains? I opened the drawer and took out Margaret's old handkerchief, its edges worn, the letter M still embroidered on the corner. I wrapped the watch inside, folded it square, sealed it with clear tape, and signed the edge. HL, gift, D0. 3 letters shaky but straight. I knew this wasn't a gift. It was the final piece of evidence, the seal of a truth with no escape. I stood before the mirror and rehearsed my lines. My voice was rough, short, deliberate, the sound of an accusation already written. "Your grandfather's watch. It still runs. Do you run with it or sell it?" If Daniel showed remorse, I would answer, "There's still time to fix things, but no time left to cheat." If Vanessa interrupted, I would say, "This is between a father and a son. Every valuation can wait until after the cuffs close." I repeated each line 3 times, until there was no shaking, no fear, no debt left in me. The reflection staring back was the man who once taught his son the difference between real and fake, now forced to use that same lesson against him. I opened the window. The Charleston sky was thick as oil, a thin moonbeam cutting through rusted bars. The cold wind blew in, rustling the sheet of paper Miller had given me the day before the 3 no's. No arguing, no staying, no turning back. I read each line again, engraving them into memory like a prayer. I looked up at Margaret's wedding photo and said softly but firmly, "No one will take this house, Maggie. No one, not even our son." Outside, crickets rasped, and the sound of dry leaves brushing along the porch whispered back, "Soon, soon." I lit my last cigarette. The smoke curled around the Elgin watch on the table, circling and fading away like the spirit of my father standing behind me, silently watching. I turned off the light, leaving only the faint gold glow from the hallway shining onto the wedding photo. "Rest easy," I whispered. "Justice will not be sold." That morning, the air in Charleston was thick, heavy as a sheet draped over a room awaiting its verdict. I made coffee, listening to the water drip into the cup, each drop steady and cold as the ticking of a clock. On the table lay the paper that once read 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now only a single number remained, 0. I crossed it out, folded the paper, and placed it in the drawer, the same one where Margaret used to keep the first receipts from when we bought this house. No phone calls that morning, no alarms, no disturbances, only silence so thick I could hear the wind seeping through the cracks in the door. I knew then everything was in its place. 9 a.m. A message from Detective Miller appeared on my screen. "Plan remains, 19. Team in position." Beneath it, one more line. "No changes, no hesitation." I replied with a single period. "Enough to confirm, and enough to mark the end of every remaining doubt. Charleston. Miller arrived in plain clothes, carrying a slim leather folder. He didn't start with small talk. Instead, he opened the folder and set 3 items on the table: a white handkerchief, a recording device hidden inside a coat button, and a folded slip of paper. 3 rules, he said. I mouthed them silently, word by word. No arguing, no staying, no turning back. Miller nodded, his eyes unblinking. We'll be stationed behind the house. When you step out the door and touch the handle twice, that's the signal. The team van will move in. I asked quietly, and if we need to abort? Hold the white handkerchief in your hand. We'll know. He paused, lit a cigarette, and lowered his voice. We don't want you to see your son in handcuffs, but sometimes justice needs a father to stand as its first witness. I said nothing. There are moments when silence is the only answer that carries weight. The cigarette smoke drifted through the dim light, curling around the room like a curtain waiting to be drawn. That afternoon, I went down to the riverbank where Margaret and I used to sit and watch the sunset. The water was still a mirror reflecting the slow drift of heavy clouds. I sat on the old wooden bench and pulled out the watch. The second hand moved slowly, as if it too were waiting for a strike of fate. A young boy pedaled by and stopped, staring. Is that really old, sir? He asked. I smiled. Yes, it only measures real time, not the moments we miss. He didn't understand, just nodded and rode away. I watched him go and saw for a moment Daniel at 10 bright eyes, holding a hammer, laughter echoing in the workshop. That memory faded as quickly as the day's last light. I stood, turned, and walked home. Charleston. I put on my old suit, buttoned the jacket, adjusted my tie, fastened the watch to my wrist. The white handkerchief folded neatly in my breast pocket. The man in the mirror wasn't trembling anymore. He was preparing for a ritual that could no longer be avoided. I opened my phone and sent a message to Miller. Lawson here, T0, moving out. His reply came instantly. Blue eyes in position. Remember the 3 rules. Understood, I typed back. Charleston. Charleston turned the color of amber. I drove slowly down King Street and stopped in front of the brightly lit house. Music, laughter, the smell of wine and grilled meat drifted out. Everything was perfectly ordinary, a flawless disguise for the night about to turn extraordinary. No longer a father's house, no longer a son's home. It belonged now to justice. As I stepped onto the porch, the sound of jazz poured out from the living room, blending with laughter, chatter, and the clinking of glasses. Vanessa opened the door. She was wearing a sapphire blue dress, her hair curled meticulously, her lips painted a vivid red. Her voice was sweet, so sweet it chilled me. Well, look who's here. What a surprise, Dad. I nodded slightly. My eyes swept across the room, glowing under golden light. Daniel was standing at the bar, pouring drinks, talking animatedly to his guests. When he saw me, he froze for a heartbeat, then forced a polite smile, the kind a host wears for someone he wishes hadn't come. Dad, I didn't think you'd show up. I didn't think you invited me. No hugs, no handshakes. Between us was a clear glass wall. We could see each other, but not touch. I looked around the house, the very house I had built with my own hands. The walls had been repainted. The family photographs were gone. In their place hung abstract art, crystal chandeliers, and lifeless flower arrangements. Somewhere, deep in my chest, something cracked faintly, but deep. Vanessa approached, a wine glass in hand. I'm so glad you came, really, she said. It's been so long since the family was all together. Yes, I replied, so long that people seem to have forgotten who bought this house. Her smile tightened. Still got that sense of humor, I see. Daniel stepped in, trying to smooth the tension. Come on, Dad. It's my birthday. Sit down. I'll pour you a drink. I don't drink, I said, my tone flat as steel. I only came to bring a gift. I took the small box from my pocket and placed it in Daniel's hand. The chandelier light caught the edges of the box, glinting faintly gold. From your grandfather, I said. It runs true when the man wearing it does. Daniel turned it over in his hand, his smile forced. Collector's item, huh, Dad? What's it worth? That depends, I said, on how often you keep your word. Vanessa chuckled, her eyes darting toward the guests who were live streaming. So vintage. It'll look great in a glass display case. Museums keep what's real, I replied. Glass only keeps reflections. The air thickened. A nearby guest raised their phone, recording. I leaned slightly, just enough for the Elgin watch to gleam in frame. This gift, I said clearly, can only be opened with clean hands. Daniel's gaze flickered. Dad, you still haven't forgiven me, have you? Forgiveness belongs to God, I said. Justice belongs to men. You don't understand, he insisted. It's not what you think. I understand more than you realize, I replied. But understanding doesn't mean forgiveness. He laughed softly, bitterness caught in his throat. You never change, do you? Always moral, rigid, untouchable. No, I said. I just don't pretend. I looked down at the table, where the Elgin box sat motionless. Your grandfather's, I said slowly. It still runs. Do you run with it or sell it off? Daniel said nothing. Vanessa stepped in, still smiling for the cameras. Come on now, let's not spoil the mood. Everyone's watching. I looked up. Voice cold and measured. This is between a father and his son. All valuations can wait until after the cuffs close. The room froze. Daniel's face flushed red. His lips trembled. I continued. I'm leaving you the last thing in this house still worth keeping. You can sell it, but don't sell your name. Daniel looked up, his eyes flashing with anger and fear. What do you even know about me? I know enough, I said, to understand that greed has an expiration date. A long silence followed. The jazz still played somewhere in the background, sounding as if it were retreating from the world. Daniel gave a dry, brittle laugh, his words slicing through his teeth. The best gift you could ever give me, Dad, is to disappear from my life forever. A sharp click broke the silence as I closed the box. That sound, crisp, final, was the punctuation mark on everything that had ever been between us. Happy birthday, Daniel. I stood. Stay for cake, won't you, Dad? Vanessa said, forcing a smile thin as a knife's edge. I'll have cake, I replied, where no one needs forged papers to eat. No one spoke. I turned and walked toward the door. All eyes followed, and in that moment, I knew. It was time. Outside, I drew a deep breath. The wind from the Ashley River swept past, carrying salt and the faint scent of liquor from the party behind me. Each step down the brick path felt heavier than all the years I had lived. At the corner of the street, I stopped. I took the Elgin watch from my pocket, watching the second hand circle precise, unwavering, never missing a beat. I pressed the side button twice. A small click echoed softly into the air. Through the earpiece, Miller's calm voice came through. Signal received. T0 confirmed. Move. I answered quietly. No arguing, no staying, no turning back. From where I sat, I could see everything. The white van with the Charleston Cable Company logo switched on its headlights. Miller's silver sedan rolled slowly into position, blocking the far end of the street. Two officers disguised as delivery men advanced toward the gate. Within seconds, the first sound broke through the sharp crash of shattering glass. Then came the thunder of voices echoing from inside the house that had once been my home. Police, don't move! Red and blue lights flashed across the first-floor windows. Shouts followed, chairs falling, footsteps scrambling. The jazz track that had been playing moments ago was cut off mid-note, strangled beneath the crisp orders that followed. Daniel Lawson, Vanessa Lawson, you are under arrest for bank fraud, identity forgery, and elder financial exploitation. It was Detective Nolan's voice, firm, commanding, unshakable. I had met him once in the interrogation room, a man of few words and steady eyes. Now he stood inside the house I had built, in the very spot where Margaret's wedding portrait once hung, reading the arrest warrant for my son. Through the rain-smeared window, I saw Daniel, his white shirt wrinkled, his face drained of color. He stood frozen by the window, lips moving but no sound coming out. Beside him, Vanessa screamed, mascara streaking black rivers down her cheeks. It was him, she shrieked. He made me do it. He forced me to sign. Nolan didn't answer. 2 female officers stepped forward and cuffed her wrists. Daniel turned toward her, eyes burning with betrayal and despair. "You sold me out. I just wanted to live," she cried. An officer pushed Daniel to his knees. The metallic click of handcuffs locking rang through the air, bright, final, and cold as a funeral bell. I stayed in my car, watching through the rearview mirror. No one saw me, only the reflection of flashing lights blurring my own face. Over the radio, Miller's voice came calm and clipped. "Arrests confirmed. No resistance. Target secured. Returning to headquarters." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. The breath came out long, half relief, half collapse. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping on the roof of my car, blending with the distant wail of fading sirens. When I opened my eyes, the house was ablaze with patrol lights. The sign that once read Lawson House glowed under the red flash as if stained with blood. I saw Daniel being led out, head bowed, hands cuffed in front of him. Vanessa followed, wrists crossed, still screaming. Between them walked Nolan and Miller, silent, stoic, the embodiment of duty. A local reporter rushed forward, thrusting a microphone toward them. Miller stopped only long enough to say one sentence. "Justice doesn't need an audience." The patrol car doors slammed shut. The metallic clang that followed rang sharp and decisive, like a judge's gavel striking the end of a trial. I bowed my head and whispered, just loud enough for myself, "It's done, Maggie. The machine of justice has completed its cycle." In the mirror, my reflection looked older, heavier but quieter than ever before. As the police cars drove away, I stayed there for a while longer. Charleston was sinking into a thin veil of rain. Raindrops slid down the windshield like streaks of time impossible to wipe away. There was no joy, no triumph. Only a dense, motionless silence, the kind that settles after the final hammer falls. I started the engine and turned off King Street. The interrogation room was as cold as a freezer. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly, pulsing like a metronome, keeping rhythm for the lies about to be exposed. Vanessa Lawson was brought into a square, windowless room, steel table, 3 chairs, 1 camera blinking red like an unblinking eye that recorded everything. The panic had drained from her face, replaced by a calculated, icy fear. No longer the gracious hostess or the fragile victim. Now, she was an animal cornered, already rehearsing her defense. The innocent wife, manipulated by her husband. Detective Nolan, the interrogation specialist, placed a paper cup in front of her. "Water," he said, "not a deal." Then he slid it back out of her reach. He read her Miranda rights slowly, clearly, each right like a nail pinning her story to the wall of truth. Vanessa angled her chair slightly to the side, a subtle act of control. Nolan nudged the chair straight with his shoe. "In here," he said calmly. "Control belongs to us." I don't understand any of this," she began, her trembling voice perfectly rehearsed. The mascara streaks appeared on cue. "Daniel handled everything. He said his father wanted to transfer ownership early, to help me start my business. It was a blessing." Nolan didn't argue. He counted instead. 1 Photos from the bank. 2 The LLC registration. 3 Gucci receipts. 4 The $152,000 transfer. 5 Your text. Money's in. Vanessa feigned confusion. "A loan? I never saw any documents. Maybe he forged my signature like he did with his father's. Oh my God." Nolan flipped over a photograph. Date, time, angle, all marked. "Memories are recorded in HD now, Mrs. Lawson." He turned the screen toward her, showing her own smile beside the impersonator at the teller's desk. "What kind of victim escorts the perpetrator into the scene of the crime?" He pushed another folder toward her. Vanessa Lawson Properties, LLC, bearing her clear signature, credit card statements, the Gucci receipts, and the ledger showing the $150,000 wired directly into her company account. Vanessa's face went pale. Her tears vanished in an instant. Nolan slid a tissue box across the table, deliberately short of her reach. A female investigator entered to observe, watching the rhythm of Vanessa's breathing, the way her tone shifted between I and he. The mask began to crack. "Fine," Vanessa said at last, her voice turning hard. "I knew about the loan, But it was his idea. He forced me. I'll testify against him. I'll tell you everything. What can you offer me? Nolan closed the Project Blue Book file. Testimony is a consequence, he said evenly, not a reward. At the word leniency, her eyes lit up cold and sharp, like fake diamonds catching light. She demanded a public defender. Before the door shut, she glanced through the glass just long enough for that look to pierce the heart of the man waiting in the next room. Switch rooms, Daniel Lawson. His chair sagged as though already defeated. The expensive suit from the party was now wrinkled under the harsh fluorescent glare. Nolan placed a small pendulum clock on the table. Its tick filled the silence, pressing on every second that passed. Daniel looked up at the third tick, then down at his wrists' red bands where the cuffs had been. For the first time, he saw the true cost of a forged signature. Nolan didn't ask why. He asked, "Who printed the first draft of the loan file?" Daniel inhaled slowly. "I did." Each time Nolan placed another document, copies, surveillance stills, statements, Daniel's voice grew softer. He didn't deny anything. He just nodded, one piece of evidence at a time, as if each page added another stone to his chest. Then came the blow. "You should know," Nolan said evenly. "Your wife's been in the next room for an hour. Her story's different. She says you controlled her, lied to her. She's offering to testify against you in exchange for a plea." Daniel froze, as if electrocuted. His eyes went unfocused. He asked for a phone call. His finger hovered over my number, then stopped. "Later," he whispered. Later meaning after sentencing. Nolan slid a cheap blue pen toward him. "Write it out, in order. The money's path in and out." Daniel nodded. "Money came from Harborview, went to Lexus, then to Amalfi, then to the LLC. Each location was another shovel of dirt over the grave of his dignity. When he signed the statement, his hand trembled. The genuine signature broke apart beneath the fake one he'd once used in my name. He asked softly, "Does he hate me?" Nolan replied, "The law doesn't hate. It counts." The investigator read out the statute on elder financial abuse. At the word aggravated, the report noted that Vanessa's pulse spiked on the other side of the wall. Daniel confessed. He had planned to repay it after the Rome trip, but Vanessa had called him weak. That, he said, was the day his soul died. "Any voluntary statement," Nolan reminded, "helps your case." "I'll tell it all," Daniel said. At the end of his written statement, he added a line no one asked for. "I'm sorry, Dad." That line was preserved as written. Outside, Vanessa slammed her manicured nails against the steel table. "I have to protect my reputation," she screamed. Nolan replied calmly, "Your reputation is evidence." The recording captured the sound of Daniel's uneven breathing right as he whispered, "I choose," before the tape automatically switched channels, as if even the machine understood the breaking point of a man. I felt no satisfaction hearing any of it, only a grim confirmation that my son's real punishment was not the sentence awaiting him, but the realization that he had lost his father, his future, and his freedom, all for a love as counterfeit as the signature he forged. The next morning, a light rain fell over Charleston. The bitter smell of coffee filled the dim kitchen. I sat at the table without turning on the lights, staring through the fogged window. The van marked Charleston Cable Company was gone, only faint tire tracks remained on the wet street, traces of the justice that had just passed through. Around 9, the phone rang. It was Detective Miller. His voice was steady, neither pleased nor heavy, simply factual. "We've taken their statements." Daniel stayed silent for half an hour before asking for an attorney. Vanessa talked almost everything. "I waited," she said. Miller continued. "It all began when Daniel discovered the HELOC account already open. He found a notary named Leo Gallo and forged your signature to secure a loan against the house under your name." Papers rustled on the other end before Miller read slowly. "Stated purpose, according to the file, temporary use for a real estate investment in Beaufort to be reimbursed within 3 months. Actual purpose, funds wired directly to Seed LLC, then to Amalfi Travel for a honeymoon package. 2 days later, account balance 0. Silence stretched between us. She said Daniel believed you'd never notice. Miller went on quietly. He thought you were too old, too trusting. When he realized you were suspicious, he planned to sell the house to erase the debt. I closed my eyes. Each word struck like a hammer against memory. The house where Margaret and I once argued about painting the porch railings. The house where Daniel had taken his first steps. Now that same house was evidence. Vanessa admitted to collaborating in the forgery, Miller continued. She signed knowing exactly what it meant. In exchange, Daniel promised to pay off her mother's debt. He said, "We're only borrowing from him. He's not using it anyway." My chest felt heavy, like iron pressing down. "Did they ask for leniency?" I asked. "The prosecutor will consider it," Miller said. "But with the video footage, bank records, and forged seal, the charges won't move." He paused, his tone softening. "Daniel asked to see you." "No," I said. "Not yet, not today." "I understand. One more thing, when we confiscated evidence, he asked to keep the Elgin watch, said it was his father's keepsake." "You keep it," I said. "It's evidence and a reminder." That afternoon, I went to the riverfront. The Ashley River drifted lazily, the sunset dull and gray. I carried Margaret's old notebook and turned to the page written in blue ink. "Justice never arrives through anger. It comes through the courage to hold on to truth even when truth breaks you." I read it again and again. Her voice seemed to echo somewhere close, gentle, sorrowful, but steady. 3 days later, Maria called. "Henry," she said, "Daniel just signed his second confession identity fraud of a family member. Vanessa has agreed to testify as a cooperating witness." "What did he say when he signed?" "Only one thing," she replied. "I thought I forged a signature. Turns out I forged my whole life." That night, I went to St. Raymond's Church. The altar candles burned low. Father Raymond approached softly. "Would you like to make confession?" "No, Father," I said. "I just need to talk to God without a translator." I knelt, watching the flame flicker. "I did the right thing," I whispered. "So why does it hurt this much, God?" There was no answer, only my shadow stretching long across the wall. When I returned home, the Elgin watch lay sealed in an evidence envelope on the table. I didn't open it. I simply set it beside Margaret's photograph. "He confessed," I said quietly. "Justice has been served, yet my heart is still not at peace." Outside, rain tapped slowly against the tin roof, steady as the tick of time itself. I touched the glass over Margaret's face. She smiled softly, as if understanding all the things I could not say. I took a sheet of paper, wrote a single line, and pinned it beside my desk. "Forgiveness is not erasing the crime. Forgiveness is keeping your heart clean after justice has dirtied your hands." The small house on Beaufain Street fell into stillness. No more red and blue lights. No more sirens. Only the faint ticking from the sealed envelope, steady, unwavering, like the heartbeat of a conscience still alive. 2 months passed between the arrest and the trial, 2 months that felt like years, slow and grinding, like stone worn down by water. The machinery of the law moved on, steady, cold, and without mercy. No longer driven by emotion, only by procedure and evidence, and both carried their own weight. Maria handled nearly everything. She worked with the prosecutor's office, building the case like laying a foundation, every document a brick, every bank statement an anchor, until the path from greed to crime became as visible as exposed wire. Each transaction, each photo, each testimony was numbered and ordered precisely by time. When the timeline of transactions appeared on the courtroom screen, the inflows, the outflows, the purchases, the vacations, the room went completely silent. The numbers glowed on the monitor like blades, cutting through the quiet. The trial opens. Courtroom number, 3 Federal Court of Charleston, 9 a.m. The gallery was packed. Reporters filled the last rows. Cameras were banned. Only pens and notebooks remained. Court officers rechecked every recording device, every metal detector. Judge Eleanor Mayfield, known for her strictness and integrity, entered. Everyone rose. The words "all rise" rang out like an ancient ritual. Before the arguments began, the clerk read aloud the statutory charges, including financial exploitation of an elder aggravated circumstance. The word aggravated fell into the room like a stone. At the prosecutor's table, Maria gave me a brief nod, a reminder that everything was proceeding as it should, even if it was a road no one wished to walk. The trial of the defendants, Daniel Lawson and Vanessa Lawson, for bank fraud, identity forgery, elder financial exploitation, and criminal conspiracy is now in session. I sat in the back row, silent. Maria sat beside me, her warm hand resting on mine. I hadn't planned to come, but she had said, "You should see it through to the end to close it properly." The prosecution's case. The prosecutor rose, his tone firm and measured. The defendants Daniel Lawson and Vanessa Lawson used forged documents to misappropriate $152,000 drawn from a mortgage on the house owned by the defendant's father. They transferred funds through multiple intermediary accounts, spent them for personal use, and legitimized the theft through a shell company. The slide appeared on screen. Vanessa Lawson Properties LLC capital source, $152,000. The faint hum of the projector filled the courtroom, ticking softly like a clock marking time. Vanessa sat rigid, lips pressed until they bled. Daniel kept his eyes on the floor, not daring to look at anyone. The prosecutor concluded, "This is not merely fraud, it is betrayal, and the victim is the very man who gave the defendant life." The defense. Following Maria's counsel, Daniel chose to plead guilty to all charges. She whispered to me, "If the admission is sincere, the judge might lower the sentence. You just nod when appropriate." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was agreeing with truth or simply surrendering to loss. Across the aisle, Vanessa took the opposite route. She fired her lawyer, hired another, and changed her argument every week. At times a manipulated victim, at others a deceived partner. But when the prosecution displayed the photo of her smiling at the bank counter, pen in hand, signing the loan documents, her face went pale. Her eyes flicked toward me, the desperate look of someone cornered, still searching for someone else to blame. The judge speaks. When all the evidence was presented, Judge Mayfield closed the file in front of her, removed her glasses, and let her voice carry the weight of humanity. "This court has seen many cases of fraud, but this one stands apart. You did not rob an anonymous institution. You used your own father's name to drain the savings of his life, turning the home he built over 40 years into an ATM." She paused, staring directly at Vanessa. "The defendant shows no remorse. You lie, manipulate, and shift blame. You are not a victim, you are a willing accomplice." Vanessa raised her chin, lips trembling. "I'm sorry for trusting the wrong person." A quiet laugh rippled from the back of the courtroom. The gavel struck sharply. "Order." The judge turned to Daniel, her tone softening only slightly. "You had everything a loving father, a good home, a solid foundation, and you threw it all away. This is the deepest betrayal a son can inflict while his father is still mourning his mother. The only difference today is that you chose to tell the truth." The defendant's last words. By procedure, the defendants were allowed final statements. Daniel rose slowly, gripping the edge of the stand. "Your Honor, I have no defense. I sold the worth of my own name." He turned toward the gallery, searching for me among the crowd. His eyes were swollen, dry beyond tears. I didn't look away, nor did I nod. I just met his gaze long enough for him to understand. "Noted," the judge said. "The verdict." Her tone returned to the crisp cadence of the law. "For the crimes of bank fraud, identity forgery, and criminal conspiracy, this court sentences Vanessa Lawson to 12 years in federal prison." Vanessa inhaled sharply, turning to her attorney, then fixed her stare on me. "For the same charges," the judge continued, "and in consideration of his full admission of guilt, this court sentences Daniel Lawson to 8 years in federal prison." No one spoke. Only the scratching of the clerk's pen and the ticking of the courtroom clock, an echo of the old Elgin watch that once rested on my wrist. The prosecutor added, "Seizure of the white Lexus, luxury watches, and the LLC bank accounts." The sound of keys and typing struck the air like hammer blows. The court ordered, "No contact with the victim, No letters, no calls, no intermediaries. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Maria requested permission for the victim to speak. I stood, my hand gripping the rail for balance. I won't speak long, I said. I only ask for safety for what remains of my life. Then I looked at my son. I once taught you how to level a floor. Today, you have measured yourself before the law. The end of the session. When she heard 12 years, Vanessa slammed her nails against the defendant's table. The court officer held her by the shoulder. Order. When he heard 8 years, Daniel only nodded faintly, whispering, I know, as if the sentence had already lived inside him long before the gavel fell. Judge Mayfield delivered her final words, part instruction, part verdict. The court does not strip humanity, but it must draw boundaries. The gavel struck. The sound closed the room like a steel door. Daniel didn't move. He closed his eyes, and a single late tear slid down his cheek. When the officers approached, he opened them again, searching for me. No anger now, only shame and remorse. The apology didn't need words. I answered with a single nod, all I had left to give, and watched as he disappeared through the side door. After the trial, outside, the press lights flared. Maria shielded me with her briefcase. Don't answer the question, how do you feel? She said quietly. Today, we stay silent and let justice speak for us. The prison van rolled away. The sound of clinking chains followed like the bell signaling the end of a long hour. After the proceedings, the clerk handed back the sealed evidence bag, the Elgin watch. I pressed it against my chest without opening it. Time, too, needed to serve its sentence. Back home, the silence that once felt like rest was now a reminder, a hollow echo of what was gone. First Margaret Lawson, and now, in a different but equally final way, my son. A few months after the trial, I received a letter from Daniel Lawson. The envelope was stamped "Inspected," its edge roughly torn open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in shaky handwriting. A page of tangled apologies from a man who had finally reached the bottom of his life. At the end, 3 small words. Will you come? For weeks, the letter sat untouched on my nightstand. The part of me that still burned with anger wanted to throw it away, to leave my son alone in silence. But another part, the foolish yet unextinguished part that still belonged to a father, knew I had to go. Before I left, Detective Miller called with a brief warning. Keep your boundaries. Make no promises. Just listen and only acknowledge what can be measured. The federal prison was a 2-hour drive from King Street. Gray concrete walls, iron gates, a low ceiling of sky. The steel door shut behind me with a heavy metallic click. The air smelled of bleach, rust, and damp sharp enough to catch in the throat. The visitation room was long and narrow, painted a pale institutional green. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of metal spoons clattered against trays, each note a slow counting of human mistakes. Before Daniel arrived, another inmate passed by and brushed the glass, leaving a faint handprint, a ghostly warning of what awaited me. When the guard finally brought Daniel in, I almost didn't recognize him. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by an oversized orange jumpsuit. He looked thinner, hollow-eyed. The arrogance from that birthday night was gone, leaving only a pale, lost man, younger than his age, stripped of everything that makes a man grow old with dignity. He sat down, picked up the receiver, his hands marked by his inmate number awkwardly trying to hide beneath the table. I gestured to him. Don't hide. If you want to begin again, hiding won't help. Then I said 3 opening sentences. I didn't bring money. I didn't bring a lawyer. I only brought the truth. We sat in silence. The faint static of the phone line was like a thin thread connecting 2 worlds an ocean apart. He finally spoke, voice trembling. Dad, I'm sorry. He coughed immediately afterward, almost choking on the weight of the words. A guard placed a paper cup of water before him. Speak slower, he said. I asked, what are you sorry for, Daniel? Say it. I need to know you understand. I was searching for whatever foundation inside him was still strong enough to bear weight. Daniel looked up, eyes red. For everything. For the money, the lies, the words I said that night. For disrespecting Mom, for letting Vanessa control me, for being weak, for being a coward, for breaking your heart. Then he recounted it all: the appraisal call, the loan submission, the moment he chose the forger. Each detail like a marker on the slope he had slid down. He admitted he had practiced saying, "Get out of my life," in front of a mirror for a week before the party, and that when he heard himself, even he was disgusted by his own voice. He didn't blame Vanessa. He took it all upon himself: his weakness, his greed, and his desperate hunger to look successful in the eyes of others. One lie had led to another, until his whole life had become a room without windows. He was confessing not just to the law, but to his conscience. I didn't offer comfort. I gave him an assignment instead. In 30 days, you will handwrite the entire chain of your actions and draft a real restitution plan. Anything bought with that money, sell it. Transfer the proceeds to the restitution fund. Keep receipts. Show proof. A prison chaplain passed by, leaving a pamphlet on the table. The 12 Steps of Rehabilitation. I pointed to step 4, a fearless moral inventory. Daniel nodded, eyes wet. I reminded him of the bird with the broken wing from his childhood. When it died, you buried the nest. Today, you must bury the man you used to be. He asked quietly, "Will you come again?" I answered firmly, "Each time I visit, I need to see proof of progress. Your work hours, study certificates, restitution receipts. When you have those, I'll consider it." From the next booth, another inmate snickered. "Another apology story, huh?" Daniel clenched the receiver tighter. I spoke softly, just for him to hear. "Ignore them. Do your work." I slid through the glass a photocopy of his sentencing sheet, the line under restitution, marked in red. He inhaled deeply, like a craftsman reclaiming his blueprint. I told him, "I'm not talking about forgiveness. I'm talking about scaffolding. I've built the frame. Whether you climb up and rebuild, that's on you." Then I continued, slowly. Forgiveness isn't a switch. There's no miracle that resets everything. The past doesn't vanish. This crack may never fully mend, but that doesn't mean there's no path forward. He stayed silent, eyes glistening. I said, "You have 7 years. 7 years to drown in bitterness, or to repay what you owe to society, and to yourself. The man you'll be when you walk out depends on the foundation you rebuild now." He whispered, voice small and childlike, "Dad, will you wait for me?" I didn't promise. I can't answer that. If you truly change, become honest, responsible, learn the difference between value and cost. Then when you're free, we'll talk about the future. The guard stepped forward, hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Time's up, Lawson." Daniel stood, still looking at me through the glass. "I love you, Dad." The words barely reached before the line went dead. He was led away. I watched him go. A man beginning the hardest journey of his life. In the parking lot, another mother held her son's photo and sobbed. I realized this tragedy didn't belong to me alone. And in that moment, I felt a little less alone myself. That night, I reopened Daniel's envelope. Beneath the line, "Will you come?" was a hand-drawn chart of empty squares, each one labeled "week without lying," all of them blank. I took a pen and wrote in the first box, "Today." A week later, Daniel sent his work log, kitchen, laundry, library. I circled labor, and beneath it, I wrote what my father once told me: "Don't let ambition blind you." Through the prison messaging system, I replied, "If there's a workshop, build a birdcage. When you come home, hang it on the old oak tree, not to atone, but to remember that once you knew how to love." The next day, Detective Miller called after his prison visit. "You holding up?" he asked. I answered, "Not yet. But this time, my sadness isn't blind." I hung up. The line went silent. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel entirely cut off from the world anymore. After many prison visits, I returned to the Lawson House on King Street, a house that was no longer the same. On the first night I opened the door, the coat hook nail fell to the floor. When I bent down to pick it up, I found one of Margaret's silver hairs caught in the ring, thinner than memory, but sharp enough to nick my hand and draw blood. The silence that had once been filled by Margaret's warmth now carried another shadow, the shadow of the Daniel Lawson I had lost. Every room held a double exposure. On the door frame where we marked height, I saw both the boy grinning wide and the man who had betrayed me. I drew another line with a pencil, wrote small beside it, "The day you went to prison." Silence. Then I sanded it clean. Wood dust rose like the ashes of another Lawson line. In the kitchen, the image of Vanessa and Daniel bowing their heads over the table pressed down over the memory of Margaret baking. The house no longer felt peaceful. I lit a candle on the mantel, its flame glancing off a crack in the ceiling like a hastily stitched artery. I understood. If I wanted to keep the good memories, I would have to leave the place that held the past. I decided to sell the house. A young agent opened an iPad, voice smooth. "If we rip out the garden and paint everything white, you can add 11%. I closed the iPad. I sell to people who live, not to a render. I went to see Mrs. Bennett, an older woman with a worn wool scarf, carrying no measuring tape. She set the scarf on the arm of the rocking chair and smiled. "This house is warm in places others can't see." She didn't talk price. She said only, "We'll find someone who loves this house the way you did." The hardest part was sorting 43 years of memories. I went through closets, the attic, the wood shop, an archaeology of myself that hurt. Sawdust had settled in the plank seams. I blew on it, and the dust drifted down onto family photos like fine snow. I found Daniel's first baseball glove, a box of old homework, and the lopsided clay cup Margaret had been given for Mother's Day. In the attic, a tin box held an unsent letter from Margaret to Daniel when he was 17. "If one day money feels more important than people, come back to the garden with me." I folded it, dry-eyed. The rocking chair creaked, as if counting down the days with no Margaret, and now, no Daniel. I set myself a test, a 15-minute timer. In that time, every item had to be judged keep or release. The bell rang like a judge's gavel. The keep pile fit only a cedar chest, the photo box, the blanket Margaret loved, and the old Elgin watch my father had passed down, the clear distillate of love. The release pile stretched to the back door, dishes, chairs, cupboards, fragments of a life that had once taken shelter here. I understood. Love is light, ownership is heavy. In the last drawer, I found a used gift card, tucked between a Father's Day card Daniel had written, "Dad, you're the man I admire most." The two pieces of paper seemed to burn each other up. I called the Elder Financial Abuse Support Center, the one Margaret used to donate to. "Please come take the items. If you can sell them, set up a small fund in the name of Margaret Lawson." Mr. Dunbar, the man whose window Daniel once paid to replace, hobbled over with his cane and said, "If you sell it cheaply to a young family who knows how to plant things, I'll sign as a witness for the price." I wrote a letter to the future buyers. "Please keep the oak tree and the brick with the letter R under the step. That's where Margaret sat to look at the garden." Mrs. Bennett nodded. "That clause doesn't set the price, but it sets the meaning." The doorbell rang. The charity team had arrived. When they lifted the sofa we used to watch movies on and the bed where Daniel was born, I set my hand on the boards and whispered, "Thank you." Then I let go. On the last evening, I tapped the beam 3 times, with a hammer, one for my father, one for Margaret, one for the boy Daniel. The resonance ran from the attic down to the floor, and then stopped. I pried one brick from the chimney, carved a small R, and slipped it into my pocket. "When you get out, we'll build a small fireplace again." I walked down the hallway. On Daniel's door, I hung the seashell chime once more. "When you come back the right man, the house will ring with joy." Then I took it down and placed it into the photo box, the last keepsake that could still hold the voice of the wind in this roof. 2 days later, the closing took place at a law office downtown. I asked for an addendum. "Do not destroy the garden. Keep the oak and the step with the R." The young couple looked at each other and nodded as if agreeing to adopt a soul. When it came time to sign, the pen hesitated. I pulled the pencil from behind my ear and signed in a single, straight, firm stroke. The attorney smiled. "The signature of a working man," I answered, "and of a man who knows when it's time to leave." The buyers, a young couple with a girl about 6, looked over the hand-drawn diagram of the rafters I had brought. The husband asked, Anything we should know about the house? I said. On rainy nights, the house sounds like a train that's the wood breathing, not fear. The wife laughed and pulled her daughter close. The closing ended. Before leaving the office, I set a slender notebook on the table. The watering schedule, the blooming days of each flower bed, Margaret's recipe cards, and one last line. This house favors the patient. Outside, the sky was still overcast, but the rain had stopped. I stepped out, breathed in the damp air, and knew I had just closed a chapter 40 years long. Back at the gate, Mr. Dunbar stood waiting with his cane. Would you shut the door for me one last time? I slid the bolt. The little click blended with the wind, a chorus with the memory of a summer that once shattered a pane of glass. I left the old key ring in a tin on the porch with a note. This key opens the side tool shed where every repair begins. When I bent down, the wooden table I'd built wobbled slightly. I drove one more screw, wiped my hands on my pants, and murmured, "One last fix." In the garden, I buried a glass vial beneath Margaret's flower bed. The wedding photo, a single screw, and a scrap of paper. A house isn't walls, it's a promise. The little girl came over hugging a pot of lavender and asked, "Grandpa, will this plant agree to live here?" I crouched down. "It will. If it hears soft music and doesn't rush to grow." She laughed, a clear sound like the song this house once knew. I tugged the wind chime once it answered with 3 notes, the same number as the hammer taps on the beam. The circle closed. I didn't look back. I walked straight on, without checking the rearview mirror. Memory sat beside me, but the decision held the wheel. I turned on the radio. The country song Margaret loved crackled in through static. I let it play. My right hand stayed on the wheel. My left touched the old Elgin watch. The second hand still ran, and so did I. When the sea breeze slipped through the cracks of the car window, I knew I had truly left Charleston. The scent of salt filled the cab like a certificate of freedom. Behind me were streets full of ghosts. Ahead lay the smooth, bright light of South Carolina's coast. I drove south, no destination, no plan, only the feeling that salt water knew how to cleanse what time could not. I stopped in a small town near Beaufort, where the wind carried the fragrance of jasmine and Spanish moss hung from old oaks like whispers from the earth. At Port Royal docks, I scattered a handful of sawdust over the water, for what has been cut down, for what will grow again. The tiny waves curled and carried the wood dust away. There were 3 houses for sale. I chose the one whose porch creaked when I stepped on it, the sound of an honest frame. A single story, low roof, a backyard large enough to replant Margaret Lawson's garden. On the front door, I hung a hand-painted sign, "No lies may enter this house." That first night, I spread a mattress on the bare floor and placed the old Elgin watch beside me. Its second hand struck in steady rhythm, just loud enough to drown out the sound of the waves. I fell asleep between the ticking of time and the breathing of the sea, as though the two had signed a temporary truce. The next morning, I built 3 wooden garden beds shaped like the letter R and buried seeds of lavender and climbing roses, the same flowers Vanessa Lawson once wanted to cut down. Each strike of the hammer was an act of rebirth. My neighbor, Mr. Whitaker, an old fisherman, leaned against his porch post and called out, "New in town, sir?" "I call it a new life," I said. He chuckled. "A new life needs a good hammer." Then he handed me his own worn-handled one, the first gift from this town. I began with small things. I fixed the broken step of the little free library at the end of the street. A brown-skinned girl clutching books watched me and whispered, "You nail better than the city does." I smiled, saying nothing that these hands had once built an empire and also destroyed it. Sometimes, the old shadows still followed. In the supermarket, I saw a young man swipe a credit card. For 15 seconds I froze, unable to remove my hand from the pocket where my documents lay. The old fear still had teeth, but this time, it couldn't bite. A week later, Daniel Lawson sent me a pencil sketch of a birdcage. I'm learning to make it. I placed the postcard under the basil pot on my porch so it could absorb enough sun and hope. Another day, Detective Clara Morales, my former neighbor, called. "You living again?" I'm teaching a boy a trade, I answered. He doesn't know how to lie with his hands. In the first few months, I tried to live as a retired man, fishing, reading, walking the beach, but the hands of an HVAC technician after half a century of work didn't know how to rest. One afternoon, on the porch, I opened the drawer, took out all the money from the house sale, and poured it over the wood surface. Then I opened Margaret Lawson's notebook and wrote, "This money will not buy silence, it will buy opportunity." On the porch, I burned the copy of the Harborview Federal Bank letter. The ashes clung to my fingertips. I smeared them into the shape of an R on the railing rose. That was my vow. The next morning, I met with a lawyer and registered the Maggie Lawson Foundation for Craftsmanship, a scholarship fund for women in trades like repair, HVAC, and civil engineering. A bank officer frowned. Craft foundations don't make much media impact. I folded the papers and smiled faintly. The impact of a roof doesn't need a camera. I rented an old garage as a workshop. On its wall, I hung the only picture of Margaret, her eyes shining like the headlamp at the end of a pier. I built a long bench for the ferry dock and carved underneath, "If you're tired, sit. If you're strong, help lift." Unsigned. Every Saturday night, neighborhood kids spread newspapers on the workshop floor, each holding a screwdriver, their faces smudged and curious. In their laughter, I heard Margaret's words again. "We don't need many people, just a few good ones." One afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell, a widow, brought me pie to thank me for fixing her air conditioner. We sat listening to insects. She asked, "Do you still count the ticks of that watch every night?" I smiled. "And you? Do you count the waves?" Time passed. The Maggie Lawson Foundation grew into the Lawson Workshop and Training Hall. I called up a few old contractor friends to fix the doors, raise the beams, and rewire the place. Above the entrance, I hung a wooden sign, "Lawson Workshop and Training Hall." On the inside wall, I posted the rules. Measure twice, drill once, speak once, and mean it. Anyone who bent a ruler got a week's suspension. I paid apprentices with brown envelopes. This is payment for the value you create, not charity. When Luis Ortega cracked a nearly finished tabletop, I handed him sandpaper. Don't hide mistakes. Sand until you can hear the wood breathe. Next to Margaret's photo, I mounted the wooden spoon she used to stir jam, and beneath it, a small shelf labeled, "The Museum of Honest Mistakes." Here, every flaw was a lesson, not a stain. A reporter asked, "Did you start this foundation to atone?" "I started it to reclaim the Lawson name from those who misused it," I replied. A mother asked, "Do you plan to make these kids into lifelong workers?" I pointed to the workshop. "I plan to make them into people who stand upright for life." A corporation offered to sponsor us in exchange for putting their logo all over the walls. I asked the kids for their opinion. Jasmine Reed said, "I'd rather hang my mom's name first." I shook her hand. "Then we don't sell the walls." Letters from prison arrived regularly. I've learned it now. I pinned one beside the rule board, unsigned. When anyone asked whose it was, I said, "From someone learning how to be human again." When a storm swept through, the roof shook. By morning, the frame still stood, and the rose beds were untouched. I texted Detective Clara Morales. This time, the frame held. The kids started calling me Old Man Lawson. I taught them patience, pride in every tight and trustworthy joint. When the mayor offered me an award, I asked instead for a young oak tree. A small plaque beneath it read, "The Margaret Oak Stronger After Every Storm." The heavy silence of the Lawson House on King Street had been replaced by the music of hammers and the laughter of working hands. The old pain hadn't vanished, it had burned into fuel. I looked at the new brass plaque hanging by the entrance. Lawson Workshop and Training Hall. I pointed at the word keep. Keeping is harder than building. Late in the afternoon, I taught Jasmine the dovetail joint. She exclaimed, "It fits." I nodded. Fitting isn't enough. It has to fit and be trusted. Maybe that's the simplest definition of legacy. I finally understood. A foundation built on love can endure every storm, while a roof built on lies collapses the moment it touches truth. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it reclaims the future from its grasp. Wealth isn't what you own, but what you leave behind in others. Sometimes, you must let go of the child you once raised, so the person they can become has room to grow. And the heaviest doors we ever close are often our own, yet they open into the freest dawns. What do you believe is the greatest legacy a person can leave behind? Share your thoughts in the comments below.